Mr. President, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, good morning and welcome to the Athens Democracy Forum. I confess that when we first thought about the idea of this forum, we thought of it as more of a confident celebration of democracy than an anxious interrogation. But such is life, and here we are. Let me begin with a confession. I have a profound respect for the intelligence of the voter. I know that Churchill is often quoted as saying that the best argument against democracy is a 5-minute conversation with the average voter. But more important is what he actually said in the House of Commons in 1944. And this is what Churchill said: "At the bottom of all the tributes paid to democracy is the little man walking into the little booth with a little pencil, making a little cross on a little bit of paper. No amount of rhetoric or voluminous discussion can possibly diminish the overwhelming importance of this point." Now, great men are no less vulnerable to the whims of this ballot casting. Churchill, you will recall, was voted out of office in July 1945, just 2 months after his extraordinary victory. Talk about gratitude. You defeated Hitler. Well, good riddance. Still, Churchill respected the little pencil. Why? Because the alternative is tyranny in one form or another. And the greatest achievement of his life was to save the world from the tyranny from the hell to which tyranny can lead. Now, who remains unmoved by the first words of the US Constitution? We, the people of the United States. Or, 47 years later, in the midst of the Civil War, by Lincoln's summation of the cause for which the dead at Gettysburg had sacrificed their lives. That government of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish from the earth. A single voter may have it wrong. Millions do not. It may be true that, as Einstein suggested, the only difference between genius and stupidity is that genius has its limits. Still, we the people know something. Voters send a message about their lives and the leadership they want, and that message of late has been angry. Now, I don't believe this dissatisfaction is irrational. Nobody, looking back at the first 16 years of this century, can suggest that the political, economic, and financial elites who brought you the euro, the war in Iraq, the Great Recession of 2008, growing inequality, and at least until last year in the United States, middle-class wage stagnation, have not made some very serious mistakes of very enduring consequences with very startling impunity. This has not been lost on the little woman with the little pencil in the little booth. She knows hubris when she sees it. No wonder, then, that experts and influential people of the kind gathered right here are increasingly viewed as being in the business of bamboozling for their own ends. And voters have responded by signaling they've had it with expert bamboozlement. This is a sorry season for the establishment. Ordinary folk reckon the system is rigged, that political elites, like other elites, are not in it for the people, but, as the president just suggested, for the money. This is the age of distrust. No two American presidential candidates have ever been as distrusted as Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton. The grave mistakes that I've mentioned occurred in the midst of a technological whirlwind that moved factories offshore and migrants onshore, destroyed millions of stable manufacturing jobs in the West, while creating equal millions in the developing world, and offered huge opportunity for the initiated at the hubs of globalization's churn, while stripping many outlying places and outcast people of their raison d'etre. Technology, ladies and gentlemen, is a wonderful thing if you are putting it to use. less so if it is putting an end to your usefulness. A substantial number of people in our liberal democracies feel they are being tossed hither and thither by forces beyond their control, nowhere more so than in Greece, where national elections in recent years, and there have been a lot of them, have revealed an almost complete disconnect between the vote itself and any tangible effect. What then is democracy? A mere game? Precariousness and anxiety have grown throughout the West. They lead, quite simply, to unhappiness. This is not silent unhappiness. In the age of social media, it is cacophonous unhappiness. It is also tribal unhappiness, to each his or her preferred rant. There's been another whirlwind, a cultural one. In Middle America, a lot of white blue-collar workers feel that somewhere on the road from whites-only bathrooms to choose-your-gender bathrooms, their country got lost. The prevailing liberal urban ethos on issues like same-sex marriage, transitioning genders, immigration, and law and order is rejected and resented. When Poland's foreign minister says the world should not move in one single direction, quote, toward a new mix of cultures and races, a world of cyclists and vegetarians, he is evoking a similar bristling in European form. Now, all this unease has, of course, been compounded by the sense of insecurity instilled by jihadi terrorism. From there to anti-Muslim prejudice has proved a short step in the West, particularly as short as more than 1 million refugees have poured into Europe from Syria, a Syria destroyed, Afghanistan, and elsewhere in the Middle East and Africa. Islam and democracy remain uneasy bedfellows. If law comes from God, it cannot come from the people. Outside Tunisia, the Arab Spring, of which I was a hopeful witness, devoured its own promise, caught in the web of this conundrum. Inside Europe, with its large Muslim population, often well integrated, tensions flare over values from time to time. They go much deeper than the much ballyhooed burkini and reach to a core issue, the clash of secular moral relativism with the God-given truths of religion that were once an important framework of society. This, ladies and gentlemen, is the backdrop to Trump, to Marine Le Pen, to Brexit, to the nativist and nationalist governments dominating Central Europe, to the rise in Germany of the rightist Alternative for Deutschland, to the vogue for authoritarian models. In short, to the challenges facing many liberal democracies. Marx noted that history repeats itself, first as tragedy, then as farce. The British exit from the European Union was the exception. Simultaneous tragedy and farce, a disaster abetted by lies and moral cowardice, energized by a buffoon and consummated in utter mayhem. This, ladies and gentlemen, was the moment when it became irrefutably clear that some of the very foundations of the post-war world and the spread of liberal democracy, and those foundations are free trade, free markets, the rule of law, more open borders, fact-based debate, the force of America's word, as expressed by Barack Obama in a passionate speech in London, urging Britain to remain in Europe, ever greater integration, had all collapsed. I felt, physically, my world and my assumptions about the direction of the world coming apart. Gloom descended on me and has not abated. I am pessimistic in the short term, optimistic in the long term, particularly as I won't be around to see if I was right. I'm pessimistic because the problems are deep, can no longer be ignored, and cannot be righted in short order. There is a real possibility that Donald Trump could win on November 8. He is a man for whom the words liberal democracy mean about as much as checks and balances. The only power he recognizes is his own. Still, I do not believe he is a threat to the American Republic because the institutions of American democracy are less fragile than Donald Trump's ego. Whatever the result, however, politicians are going to have to work very hard to earn back the trust of the people. A serious issue exists with what Stephen Walt of Harvard University has called the ruling elites in many liberal societies, and especially the United States, where money and special interests have created a corrupt political class that is out of touch with ordinary people, interested mostly in enriching themselves and immune to accountability. Witness 2008. This has to end. Democracy has to deliver, not just to the rich, but to the most vulnerable. This is a fundamental lesson of recent times. There have been real losers to free trade, large-scale migration, open borders, factory closures, and credible policies begin with addressing the resultant insecurity in Europe and the United States, the very insecurity that gave rise to Brexit and to the inexorable rise, despite all his gaffes, all his untruths, all his insults, of Donald Trump. When democracy creates wealth on a broad scale, there is no tension between it and capitalism. But when, as of late, that has not been the case, the value of democracy becomes much less clear to some. There are tremendous tensions between democratic sovereignty, open global markets, and mass immigration. We are a long way from the answer to these problems. Certainly the answer is not to build walls. We need to build education and innovation and opportunity through large-scale public and private investment and through the kind of debate that we see here today that leads to bipartisanship rather than polarization. A time of great uncertainty is upon the world. The post-war tectonic plates are shifting. American power is still very great, but not as great as it was. Transitions, as history shows, are treacherous. Still, in the long term, I believe in the resilience of liberal democracy, in the little man in the little booth with a little lever. Being here in Athens, we know that the democratic idea is stubborn. Technology has prized the world open. Nobody, not Putin, not Xi, not Erdogan, not Khamenei, not Trump, can arrest that development, that interconnectedness. Nor can anybody quash forever the strong human desire to be free and to live under the only form of government consistent with that desire, representative government, installed with the consent of the people and working for the people. Liberalism demands acceptance of our human differences and the ability to mediate them through democratic institutions. It demands acceptance of multiple, perhaps incompatible truths. In an age of declamation and shouting, of polarization and vilification, of politics for sale, and the insidious submersion of politics in fact-light entertainment, this may seem a lofty aspiration. But democracies have a habit of rising to the challenges they face, as Churchill demonstrated before he was summarily chased from office. Democracy under challenge is our subject. Well, that is good. Democracies need to be challenged, unlike dictatorships that fear broad challenge because it may cause them to buckle, to snap, to fall apart, to collapse. We need to be challenged. We need right now to think again. The post-Cold War world is over. Another is being born before our eyes. Challenge in democracies, as Paul Krugman suggested last year, is also reinvention and rebirth. As I said at the beginning, respect the intelligences of voters. Sooner or later, they do come to their senses, as do the democratic societies that have driven them to anger. Of course, you will recall that Winston Churchill was re-elected in 1951. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.